Good morning. Welcome. On behalf of the staff and the Board of Trustees here at the Frist Art Museum, I am delighted to welcome you all here. I'm Ann Henderson, Director of Education and Community Engagement. So thank you for joining us for our symposium today on Chaos and Awe, Painting for the 21st Century. This is our final public program for this amazing exhibition that will close on September the 16th, so I'm glad you're here now to see it. Chaos and Awe, organized by the Frist Art Museum Chief Curator Mark Scala, is a sweeping survey of contemporary art from around the world that celebrates the power of paint to weave together images of physical reality, memories, emotions, and the virtual world. Today, we are honored to welcome our own Mark Scala, along with the exhibition artist Ghada Amir, Ali Banisadr, and Matthew Ritchie, and the Chaos and Awe catalog contributor Medea Farzan. They will speak today about their artwork and the larger themes of the exhibition. I encourage you to read the program brochure for more information about each of these amazing people, their backgrounds, and contributions to this exhibition. We'd also like to welcome Terry Thacker, Professor of Fine Art, and Tom Williams, Assistant Professor of Art History, both from Watkins College of Art here in Nashville. Professors Thatcher and Williams are teaching a course on the exhibition at Watkins and will later serve as respondents to the panel discussion. I'd also like to thank Megan Rust, our public programs educator, for coordinating this special day. And I'm going to invite Megan up to the podium now to come on and do this because, of course, we are in a very social world, as we all know, and photographs are very important. So Megan is going to come up and take a picture of our amazing crowd for us. So you can wave, you can yay, that's great. I didn't trust myself with technology. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll be too nervous. But I do invite you all throughout the day to please, if you share pictures, to do that. Please do that. Our hashtag is FristChaosAwe. To do that, as well as we have in our exhibition space a social media post that you're welcome to post pictures to, and that will go up there as a response to the exhibition. So that's very important to us. The exhibition today, Chaos and Awe, is on view in our Ingram galleries and will be open today through 5:30. Mark Scala will join us in the galleries at 3:30 following the symposium for a walkthrough of the exhibition. I hope you knew that, Mark. Yeah, maybe. Okay, great. I also invite you, please, when you leave today, to complete the survey that you have on your table. That's very important to us to report back to our funders about our programs that we have here and how the programs are received by our participants. You'll also see that you have two little cards, a couple of cards on your table. One says Chaos, one says Awe. This is an art activity we have upstairs in Martin Art Quest, inviting visitors to pick a card, create artwork in response to the exhibition. So they're on your tables with colored pencils, and you're welcome to create your own response down here as the symposium goes on today. So I would like to give you another logistic, which is the restrooms are located directly in the back here to the left as I'm looking at it. There are two restrooms there, or there are restrooms down the hall back through the Conte Community Arts Gallery where you walked in probably this morning. There are more restrooms down there. And lunch will be served in the back entryway here to the auditorium later this morning. So I would like to conclude with appreciation and thanks to our sponsors of the Chaos and Awe exhibition, our platinum sponsor, HCA Foundation, on behalf of the HCA TriStar Health, our hospitality sponsor, Union Station Hotel, education and outreach sponsor, First Tennessee, and additional support to this program and exhibition provided by NEA Artworks Grant. And as always, we appreciate the continuing operating support from Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Tennessee Arts Commission. And now, please join me in welcoming Mark Scala.
Thanks, Ann. It's really great to see you all here today. It does my heart good. It seems a little weird, I know, to have a symposium like this at the end of an exhibition rather than at the beginning of an exhibition, but the reason for it, obviously, is that the exhibition is a summertime exhibition, and we were able to run it at least enough into the school year that we felt a program like this that would probably be of particular interest to artists, but also to university professors and students. It did make sense, I think, for us to have the symposium toward the end. There's still a week left. But one of the great things about having it toward the end is I've actually been walking through the exhibition just about every day. You know, it's a labor of love, of course, as any curatorial enterprise is, but this one has special meaning for me. And one of the special things about the exhibition is it started out as a speculation. What if? You know, how do we characterize or capture our time, our moment? And how do we, especially the multiplicity, the kind of, the expansiveness of our moment, the confusion, the instability of our moment. And so the paintings in the exhibition are oftentimes quite complex, quite layered, involved with so many different things, involved with time, involved with society in such a range of ways that every time I walk through the exhibition, I learn something new. So I know more now than I would have known if we had had the symposium way back in June. So that's a very selfish thing, I realize, and I apologize for that, but you know, it's one of the things that keeps me going. So what I want to do today, each speaker will speak for about 30 minutes, and if we go to 33 minutes, I hope you'll forgive us, but about 30 minutes. And what I want to do is to really just break down the title as much as anything and show how some works in the exhibition relate to the themes of the title. Just as kind of an overall, I'm sure most of you have seen the show, know in essence what the general themes and ideas are about, but I want to kind of penetrate into the word chaos. I'll even discuss the word and then of course the word awe. So all of these things actually have a very particular reason for being. And then when we talk about the second half, painting for the 21st century, because if it were painting in the 21st century, that's too big. Painting for the 21st century suggests a kind of direction, a kind of intent, that this is almost like an elegy or paean for the 21st century. So I do want to thank Anne for her introduction, Megan for coordinating this symposium, the National Endowment for the Arts for its support, Terry and Tom. It really meant so much to me to see them in the galleries with all their wide-eyed students listening to these professors who really dug deeply into the meanings of a number of the paintings in the show. I think it's a great opportunity for painting students. And gentlemen, thank you so much, and I look forward to your serving as respondents during our afternoon panel discussion. So Chaos and Awe follows several exhibitions: Paint Made Flesh, Fairy Tales, Monsters, and the Genetic Imagination, and Phantom Bodies, the Human Aura in Art. Each of these exhibitions in some way was meant to show how the body can be used in art to symbolize vulnerability, ephemerality, human complexity, multiplicity, and loss. Works in Phantom Bodies in particular linked individual loss with communal loss. There are artists who had as their subject the Holocaust, artists who had as their subject the disappearance of thousands of young women in Ciudad Juarez. So this idea of the individual body as being in some way a symbol for a much larger communal body seemed to be a great way to propel from the Phantom Bodies exhibition into an exhibition that might look at this question of how is the social body respond to pressures of vulnerability, pressures of instability. What we're looking at now is Ross Bleckner's painting that was in the Phantom Bodies exhibition. It's called A Brain in the Room. And it's inspired by a scan of a cancerous brain, showing a beautiful and toxic orchestration of floating light. So it's at once personal and universal. So following the idea that society is at some level simply an accumulation of individual bodies, Chaos and Awe was inspired by the sense that many people today feel in mind and body, a sense of anxiety, of being overwhelmed by the shifting sands of the social imaginary, which challenge our sense of a stable and a whole communal body. So the word chaos. We often think of chaos in terms of symptoms, randomness, conflicting emotions, disorder, violence. In politics, the right sees the left as inviting chaos in the guise of illegal immigrants who threaten the social order, undermine our way of life, our jobs, our safety. The left sees the right as agents of social dissolution, as it rips up treaties, attacks international alliances, and dog whistles the darker forces in our national psyche. How we negotiate mutually exclusive visions of chaos is a tangent to this exhibition. Chaos theory tells us that systems have, in quotes, a sensitive dependence on initial conditions. The introduction of an anomaly makes those systems behave unpredictably. Sounds familiar. Think of the 2016 election with its multiple anomalies. And then Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty says that both the position and velocity of an object cannot be measured or known simultaneously. You can know one or the other, but not both. Knowing one keeps you from knowing the other. There's always an unknown variable, an X factor, in any energy system. The second law of thermodynamics holds that in a self-contained system, entropy is inevitable. Energy is always lost. So open systems are unpredictable, at risk of collapse into disorder, but also able to thrive, to expand, to mutate. Closed systems may implode, become irrelevant, become neutered. Among the forces that help us open our systems in a non-dangerous way is expressive culture, literature, art, music, and foodways. Paint, with its infinite malleability, particularly when orchestrated into open compositions, can offer an apt allegory for the potential of an open system. Words 2 and 3 in the title are and awe. And, of course, is the conjunction that tells us that chaos and awe are a set living within each other. They're not options, it's not chaos or awe. Consequences, chaos thus awe, or opposites, chaos as opposed to awe. They belong together and they're separate descriptions of conditions. Awe is the feeling we get when confronted with things that are vast, ungraspable, and uncontainable. Both awesome and awful link with the idea of the sublime, traditionally describing an emotional disturbance, perhaps even terror, but also amazement at the power and breadth of nature and the cosmos, storms, volcanoes, black holes, God. Things that exceed human understanding, taking us toward oceanic feeling. Does sublime feeling also arise when contemplating culture? I believe it does. Artists in the exhibition look with awe and disquiet at the boundless reach of technology, hidden legacies of history, social upheavals, psychological conditions, spiritual conundrums, and philosophical queries. The critic, Jeremy Gilbert Rolfe, explores the relationship between sublimity and knowledge. He looks at technology. Technology is terrifying in the limitless unknowability of its potential, while being entirely a product of knowledge. So it's knowledge that cannot be comprehended by knowledge. What might an information-driven rendering of boundlessness look like? This map of London shows the dispersal of languages used on Twitter. You can go online, there's one for New York, there's one for Hong Kong. It's really very beautiful and interesting. It's an electronic image, obviously. It's based on data and algorithms, but it's soft. It's mutable. It would change tomorrow. I find it painterly, haunting, lyrical. The magical luminosity we saw in Ross Bleckner's brain scan image. If he were alive today, one can imagine the romantic painter Joseph Turner using this bird's eye will-o'-the-wisp to express the sublime, the technological sublime, in much the same way that he depicted steam power as a correlative between technology and emotion. An emotive map of the technological sublime is seen in Franz Ackermann's fever vision of upheaval in metropolitan areas around the world. Here, buildings, ductwork, conduits for communication and transportation are violently uprooted, with a room at center, that pink room, a control room. It's torn from the wrecked systems and holes in space, ripped up. Gilbert Rolfe's combination of limitlessness with pure ratio has here collapsed into chaos. Likewise, the forces of history are at once visible and invisible. Shadow histories, the subterranean flow of irrational influences, can instigate feelings of precarity. Certain works in the exhibition focus on legacies that shape culture in immeasurable ways while lurking behind a veil. A great metaphor for this is the ocean. Surface conditions are knowable, like written history, but beneath is the amorphous liquidity we call life, a universe of memory, emotion, hurt, love. Ellen Gallagher's subaqueous vision, an experiment of unusual opportunity, is an elegy for the subjects of the experiment occurring from 1932 to 1972 at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, when black men with syphilis went untreated so doctors could study the disease. The experiment continued after it was known that penicillin offered a cure. It was hidden from the public, like so many experiments on marginalized subjects occurring throughout history, the human as a lab animal. The image is impossible to read. Writhing octopus, jellyfish, let's go back to it. Writhing octopus, jellyfish, shipwreck, murky depths. What does that mean in relation to Tuskegee? What does that mean in relation to science and medicine and syphilis? It underscores the difficulties seeing the hidden face of racism. Gallagher often uses water as a symbol, and we might parse this work in this context. So here we have a watercolor on the lower right, inspired by the Afrofuturist myth of Drexcia, an underwater utopia filled with descendants of slave women thrown overboard during the Middle Passage. Ellen did a whole series of watercolors and paintings based on this very interesting kind of Afrofuturist myth. On the lower left is an image relating to the syphilis bacterium. It looks like some kind of underwater life floating in liquid, the syphilis bacterium, and then you see between them the impact of syphilis on the human body. Other images relate to the ossidax. On the upper left is the ossidax. The ossidax is the worm-eating bone, is the bone-eating worm, that when a whale dies and sinks to the bottom of the ocean, this is the worm that facilitates the decay of the bones. She's fascinated by the ossidax, by its beauty, by its agency as an instrument of decay. And the image on the right is a film that she did on the that's entitled Ossidax. So you can see she's working with this language, this underwater language. It's not quite clear. You never know exactly what you're looking at, but as you look at an experiment of unusual opportunity in the context of this larger framework, you can see how a flow between history and biology provides a rich language. Painting as a laboratory, a stew pot where the puzzles of life are allowed to simmer. In Gallagher's work, the slow process of painting lends itself to long viewing, a welcome respite in the electronic age. I'm fond of saying that it would take you you could flip through about 100 images on your cell phone in the time that it would take you to actually see that Ellen Gallagher painting. And you wouldn't be seeing any one of those 100 images on the cell phone in nearly the same way that you would see that painting in that same amount of time. Slowness is not just the purview of painting. As we watch Jeremy Blake's Winchester, we see the gradual unraveling of the mind of Sarah Winchester, the widow of the inventor of the Winchester repeating rifle, the gun that won the West. The video riffs on the Winchester Mystery House, where the widow built hidden rooms and secret passageways to escape the ghosts of murdered Native Americans, to escape the ghosts of genocide. Blake's interpretation symbolizes a nation's self-delusions as it seeks to escape the weight of history, to bury its own guilt. A more legible image of shadow history is seen in Neo Rauch's Waiting for the Barbarians. This has the same title as a novel by the South African author J.M. Coetzee, set in a colonial outpost threatened by rebellion. Officials employ torture to obtain information about the would-be attackers. In the end, there is no invasion. The threat of barbarians has been used to trigger paranoia, to solidify the power of the authorities. Has a vague resonance, doesn't it? People have sacrificed their moral compass by not questioning the excesses of the authoritarian regime. Echoing propaganda paintings in terms of style, this image reminds us of the nationalist response to the refugee and migrant crisis in Europe and the US. And here, of course, are the frightening barbarians of our own time. Many of the works in the show define emotional conditions relating to mass energies and explosive traumas. I love Medya Farzin's description of such psychic narratives, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing your thunder, Medya, but you'll forgive me, of such psychic narratives as history paintings. History paintings for a new kind of way of understanding history, which we see clearly in the conjunction of an image from the news and Rockne Harizade's own take on violent conflict. So we will hear more from Medya on the subject of history paintings. Cultural collisions can be painful, but can also result in hybridity and new growth, what William Burroughs described as the market of psychic exchange, when talking about the interzone in Tangier, where people blended cultural identities in an atmosphere in which everything was possible, all was permitted. Art can defy boundaries, mashing memory, language, and belief systems together. Multiplicity and irregularity are conditions of the sublime. Wangechi Mutu collages body images taken from glossy magazines and medical books, along with references to plant growth, ritual performance, and shamanic figures. Funkalicious Fruit Field shows fleshy pods or organs growing from soil covered with bioluminescent seeds. The plants draw our eyes toward a flying creature, part plant, part animal, part woman. Cultures may clash without violence, not always without friction, not always painlessly, but mostly leading to a new vibrancy. Go to Brooklyn, go to Miami, drive down Nolensville Road on a Saturday afternoon. We see ourselves in a new light through the cultural expression of others. But the quintessential meshing of culture in cyberspace, where information meets a nebulous sense of reality, a threshold. Corinne Wasmut's Bibliothèque CDG-BSL refers to the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, but it also contains the airport codes of Charles de Gaulle, also in Paris, and Basel, Switzerland. For me, it's an extraordinary metaphor for the fluidity and expansive possibilities of 21st century life, whether in travel or by linking the infinite capacities of the human mind to the internet, itself a virtual extension of the traditional library. Ghostly people are mere bytes of information, figurative memory fields, pixelated rooms and hallways, tables and clouds infer that there are unending pathways through this hallucinatory library. Wasmut's mental architecture describes an open and expansive system of passageways that can absorb and subsume chaos, in contrast with a closed system of Jeremy Blake's Winchester, a house that symbolizes a mind digging deeper into itself, leading to systemic, that is, psychological, collapse. This brings us to romantic notions of paint as a means of creating a phenomenal experience of the inner world. From Turner to Pollock and Rothko, the use of paint, not to depict, but to actually be a direct extension of bodily gesture and emotional urgency, make the indefinable essence within each person, to make the undefinable essence within each person into something physical. In Barnaby Furness's painting, dramatic gestures, open atmospheres, and swirls and spatters and sweeps of paint define shapeless forces that are powerful and beyond our control. Furness has used red's innate associations with spilled blood to express emotions ranging from fear and pain to awe and transcendence. Furness has used a lot of paint. And that leads us to the question, how necessary is paint in the making of paintings? And the exhibition is a medium-specific exhibition, but you will see that there are videos in it, there's a virtual reality work in it, there are two works that are embroidered. Wade Guyton's work is a computer-generated image completely. How much do you need paint in order to call something a painting? Or can painting be broadened into a discussion of a language and not just a material? Rachel Rawson's virtual painting takes the language of painting, she is a painter after all, and uses it to broaden the field of experience. I Came and Went as a Ghost Hand, that's the name of her work, translates images from Rawson's own life, her studio, her kitchen appliances, bits of detritus, to create a kinetic self-portrait. The images appear 3D in terms of space and volume, and 4D in terms of time, motion, and especially interactivity. Wherever viewers turn, forms break apart. The viewer becomes, in the artist's word, entropic moderators, destructive forces dismantling Rawson's architectural self-portrait. Just like Vosmuth, this is a gravity-free zone linking the mind with cyberspace and outer space. The paint is animated, but it still conceptually links to the language of paint. So this leads to a summation, where we try to come to grips with the relationship between chaos and knowledge. Edmund Burke, a philosopher of the sublime, equated the feeling of sublime awe and ungraspability with ignorance. When you learn about the mysteries of nature, its weather patterns, when you come to understand the workings of the internet, and Burke didn't talk about the internet, you no longer feel anxiety or inconsequentiality. You understand that you're part of this greater thing, not necessarily a victim or a puppet or an outside observer of this greater thing. But does awe go away? I doubt that it does. There's always the nut that will never be cracked. Awe at the human mind, psychology, and spirit. There can also be awe relating to the measurement of the immeasurable, what Kant and others call the mathematical sublime, which equates the imagination not to ignorance and irrationality, but to the forces of reason used to fathom the vastness of the universe. Our greatest scientific minds are often, almost always, in awe of their subjects, which reveal new mysteries as readily as the old ones are dispersed. At the end of the exhibition, in the section called Everything, artists follow this impulse toward totality. Many employ the language of maps and charts, delineations of the known that might help us project the unknown, to hint at the desire to measure or comprehend, seeking the small within the large within the small, meanings within meanings. Guillermo Quitka's map seems to represent a cartographic chaos, a jumble of place names randomly mixed together to subvert the guiding function of maps. Points intersecting with dense clusters of sinuous lines are reminders of cities and highways that take you north when you should be going south. But they also correlate with the human body, the map hinting at neural transmitters and capillaries, vessels for sending signals, transmitting energy. The color red evokes the body's interior. Its vertical format echoes the proportion of a standing person. The map hints at circuitry, such as a computer's motherboard, tying together such things as geography, biology, and technology. Quitka presents a place where viewers are less likely, in his words, to get oriented than they are to get lost. But to get lost in a universe that is infinitely larger than the edges of the map might suggest. It suggests a totality beyond measure. The edge here is not a boundary, but a simple pause. My hope is that Chaos and Awe captures something of our current zeitgeist, our current moment. The social imaginary, that network of beliefs, languages, technologies, customs, discourses, often seems to be a roiling ocean, too complex to understand or control, which give many of us feelings of awe at its vastness and helplessness at its unknowability. Yet the exhibition offers another possibility, the gift of envisioning a unified field, the dissolution of barriers rather than the building of walls. And in the end, to help us all see chaos not only as a destructive force, but also as a means of keeping our systems and structures open and living, not closed and dying. Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Medya Farzin to speak.